Come one, come all, for the Seven Kingdoms and the Free Cities. We are back for yet another episode of an Evolved review here at Entertainment Evolved. I'm your host, James Caleb Kitchens, and today I have the absolute privilege of welcoming none other than Loren from Coffee and Lore. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I was. I'm really excited to have you on. As a matter of fact, and this is a fact that I am deeply ashamed of. I think you're actually the first female guest we've ever had on the show. So
I am honestly, knowing you personally, shocked by that, Caleb.
yeah, I mean, I don't know a lot of people who are really into. I know a lot of people who are into listening to a podcast, but I don't know a lot of people that are willing to come on one. So you're not the first person to be invited, but you are the first person to accept. So
Well,
um,
I thoroughly feel super excited to be the first person.
yeah, so you've set a milestone, and I'm embarrassed that it took this long. I think this is our fifth season, but here we are. I'm glad we made it. So you have a show yourself on YouTube called Coffee and Lore. So before we get into the main event today, do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about it?
Absolutely. And congrats to you on 5 seasons of this show, cuz as a fellow content creator, it's rough out there in these streets. I've been doing Coffee and Lore for about 2 years now. I started doing it during quarantine as just something to do because I was bored out of my mind, and it's mostly based on book reviews. I read an insane amount of books to most people, generally between 100 and 125 a year. And I read everything from high fantasy to, your casual romance novel and in historical fiction. I like all of it. So, it's a lot of work of love because, especially when you're starting out, a lot of times it does feel like, mm, am I really wanting to put this much effort into it? But it's a work of love, so absolutely love doing it. And yeah, it's a lot of book reviews and a lot of. I recently started dabbling into vlogging, but my bread and butter over there is going to be book reviews.
I definitely have checked out some of your stuff, and I'm going to put a link to your channel in the description here. So if anybody's interested, they can definitely go over there and check it out. I highly recommend it. I watched your August recap, and yeah, just the insane amount of books that you read from all different genres was really impressive to me. I am going to regret when you catch up with me on the Brandon Sanderson stuff because a new book's going to come out and it's going to take me a month to read it, and you're going to be like, hurry up and finish it.
No
So
kidding, so that we can talk about it. Well, with the Sanderson stuff, I'll probably be at your pace because my husband seems to be really into it and we're reading along together, and he's a slower reader. So, with that stuff specifically, you'll be fine. Now, if we get into another series that he's not reading with me, oh, you're toast. You're in the
yeah,
dust.
yeah, I'm done. I'll have to start reading it like 6 months ahead of you and not tell you about it, and then be like, by the way, I'm on like book 7 of this, and I really recommend it.
Yeah, I am looking forward to. I have an 8 book series called The Throne of Glass on my Kindle, and it's waiting for me. And I plan to smash that. I think next month. So just read all 8 books in succession, just a couple of weeks,
I
hopefully.
am actually familiar with that series. I haven't read it, but I have a good friend that is actually in the middle of reading Mistborn right now. That is a big fan of those books. So if that's any indication.
Very cool. Very cool.
So before we get so we mentioned high fantasy here. So before we get into House of the Dragon, I want to talk about the elephant in the room, which is we've got a yet another high fantasy series, the most expensive television show ever produced for TV. I'm talking, of course, about Rings of Power, Amazon's Lord of the Rings show.
And you can tell how expensive it was. Like, some of that cinematography is just incredible. I
Yeah,
am a fan.
I mean, I the visuals, I think, surpass most films. I would dare say. I mean, they're up there with like Avengers: Infinity War and like just these huge productions of that quality. Um, it's I would say it's better produced than anything on television anywhere.
I agree because I mean, we all remember that epic Game of Thrones battle and how just awful it looked on a home television. And to bring, another high fantasy thing and have it look so much better, it's so fantastic.
I'm gonna assume that that wasn't a pun, and we're gonna move on. Uh, yeah, I agree, though. I mean, there is no comparison really for the
At all.
production
It
quality.
looks so good. It looks so good.
And not only that, the thing that was most important to me, there is uproar online, and I don't want to dig too much into this, but the show is getting review bombed because some people don't think there should be brown elves, and I'm just like, I don't even want to acknowledge that take on it because it's like you can believe in dragons and immortal creatures and whatever else, but this is too far for you. I just can't get with that.
Absolutely. It's terrible. And that's the best thing you can do is not even acknowledge it because you're just I don't know. I guess like you said, if there are dragons and hobbits and everything else, then why can't there be brown elves or brown dwarves? Like it's so silly. I just barely even give it the time of day because I see it all over.
Right. And House of the Dragon faced some similar criticism, and it was the same, like, kind of toxic corner of the fandoms. And, it's an unfortunate thing. My biggest thing here is that I wanted this to feel like the Tolkien's universe. And I think that they really nailed the tone of it, and I think it does feel like that.
Absolutely. I mean, just the feel of some of the characters, like your Nori and things, if that doesn't feel like just sheer joy in Tolkien, I don't know what does. And it's not, necessarily following a book exactly. So who's to say what can and can't happen? It's just in the Tolkien universe. So people just I feel like they're judging it too harshly and I hate to see it because I absolutely love it.
Yeah, I mean, as long as they don't do something completely off the rails, like kill off Galadriel or Elrond, or like Celebrimbor doesn't actually make the rings; it ends up being someone else. Like as long as they don't do something just completely lore breaking, then they have free reign to do whatever they want with this. I mean, we all know how
Ex-
it's going to end up, but it right now, I mean, they haven't done anything that I think would be like egregious or even remotely lore breaking.
Absolutely not. They have I feel like been very careful to stay within what is possible in this universe, but also give you some new story, some new characters. The we're seeing a lot of that human to elvish interaction there. And I'm really enjoying it where they're going.
Yeah, me too. I will be waiting with bated breath for the next episode. I think that comes out on Fridays, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so. If I'm not mistaken, or if you're not mistaken, I think it's Fridays for that and Sundays for House of Dragon.
Yes, definitely for House of the Dragon. As you know, my D&D group plays during that time, and it is very upsetting. Um, but that will bring us right into the main course here tonight. We're definitely talking about House of the Dragon episode 3 here. Since this is the first time you've come on to really talk about this, what was your experience? Because I asked this of all of our guests, like, what was your experience with Game of Thrones? Because I know that you are a book reader like myself.
Right. So I had read at least the first three books before I ever watched the original Game of Thrones series. Um, I had heard it was like hyper violent and these kind of things. And so I wasn't super keen on it. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to stick to the books. But then I got to a point where I had finished all of Martin's books. and I wanted more, and there was no more. So I started watching the show. In fact, I think for Christmas that year, I had received like all of the first 2 or 3 seasons of Game of Thrones on DVD and binged watched them. And I liked it. It followed pretty closely with the books, so I liked that about it. And then I did read Fire and Blood, which I guess is what the House of the Dragons is based off of part of it, and absolutely devoured that book as well. So I have some knowledge, and of course have watched the shows and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you probably have more knowledge of this particular topic than I do. Because I haven't actually read Fire and Blood, and I have read the original five Game of Thrones novels, but it's been I read them. I read A Dance with Dragons like when it came out, so that was before the show started. Um, I, the way that they handled it, I think the show even did some things better than the books in the early seasons. And I was really worried about them adapting A Storm of Swords because to me, I thought that was the best of the books.
I would agree with that. Storm of Swords was 100% my favorite of the books. Um, I just felt like by then we were really invested in the characters, and I really liked what he did with their storytelling. My favorite thing about those books is how seamlessly I feel like Martin jumps from each character and where they're at seamlessly throughout the chapters. I think he does a really good job of that. And I do read some high fantasy fiction or even just fantasy fiction where it's a little whiplashy, but I thought Martin did it really well.
He did, and the way he does the point of view characters is really nice. I always, like that about his writing as well. Um, so I have to ask this question of everyone that comes on too. So how did you feel about the end of Game of Thrones? Like, where were you at, like after Game of Thrones was over, and kind of like your expectations for House of the Dragon before you saw it?
I was done with Game of Thrones after the final season. I really was. I said I would read more books that Martin put out because obviously I went ahead and read Fire and Blood. But as far as the cinematic Game of Thrones, I was done because I really did not feel like that ending was the direction that Martin was taking it. Personally, this is all, of course, my personal opinion. But
Right.
Jon Snow killing Daenerys, I didn't see it. Nothing in Martin's writing gave me even an inkling that it was going that way. And then it just, I don't know. I said I was done. And then I read Fire and Blood, and it was extremely lore based and really, really good. And it hooked me again. And I was like, okay. Started hearing the internet rumblings, oh, they're gonna do a Targaryen show. They're gonna do a Targaryen show. And I've always been a House Targaryen girl, just because of the amount of lore in that house. Like, come on.
Right.
So I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And I think we were 15 or 20 minutes into the first episode, and we paused it, my husband and I, and just looked at each other. And I was like, he got me again. They got me again.
I think that's where a lot
So
of
good.
like the feedback from I've had from our listeners. I think that's where a lot of people are. I know that's where I am. Um, I will say that the pacing is certainly very different in this show compared to Game of Thrones. But other than that, I mean the quality of the writing, the production value, all of that is kind of right around where season four I think of Game of Thrones was, which is my favorite season. That's like when you could tell they had all of the money that they needed to do whatever they needed to do. uh, the show was really picking up, and I thought that the story was kind of at its strongest during that time frame. And House of the
I
Dragon
would
seems to be about there.
I would agree. 3 and 4 were, I feel like, the best seasons of Game of Thrones for me. Um, the timing on House of Dragon is really good. I really like how they're doing it. They're following a massive book. I don't
Right.
have it in front of me to tell you how many pages this book is, but it's on my shelf and it's a beast.
Yeah,
So
it's huge.
there's going to have to be some time jumping. There's going to be have to be some bouncing around to, depending on how many seasons they're trying to do, any of that. Like, they have a lot to cover coming from Viserys's line.
Yes, because like this story gets into like Aegon, like the second being
Mm-hmm.
older, right? I mean, it gets into
Yeah,
like kind of that era. So we're looking at, you know, what 40 years of time, perhaps that this could span.
absolutely. You're going to have two Aegons coming up. Obviously, the one who we see in episode 3, and then Rhaenyra is going to also have a son that she is going to name out of spite, Aegon.
Perfect. Whenever a Targaryen names their kid that, it always goes super well, as we know.
As we know.
Uh, so we actually with this episode we open up with a time skip of about 3 years because to our knowledge at the end of episode 2, Alicent's not pregnant yet, and then we're opening this episode and we are on Aegon's second name day.
Correct, correct. And so, did you feel like they aged Rhaenyra?
I feel like they aged her a good little bit. Obviously, you know, if anybody who's keeping up with the casting knows that at some point we're going to get a complete actress change for her, and I'm
Right.
that's the only thing right now that I'm really worried about with this show is will the replacement actress be as charismatic? Because I love the actress that plays Rhaenyra right now.
And that's what I was leading into is I really like that actress. And I thought that they did a good job with just subtle changes, like the way she carried herself, or maybe like a little bit of a makeup change to make her look a couple of years older. Um, and so I'm nervous about the actress change.
I am as well. I've seen the actress that's going to play her and the older Alicent, and honestly, the actress that's playing the older Alicent looks, I mean, just spot on. Looks like the current one. Um,
Right.
so it's going to be interesting to see how that, you know, how the audience handles that switch for sure. That's
Now, are they aging Matt Smith or are they doing a different character for him?
I think they're just going to age. They're going to
Him.
age Damon. Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to not do any spoilers for your listeners here.
Right. Yeah, I don't want to do any book spoilers, which for two reasons, and this is I don't know, maybe in the first episode I might have covered this a little bit, but we don't absolutely have spoilers because the book is supposed to be like the written history, right? So as we
Hmm.
know, in our world and in Westeros, the victors write the history, and this show is supposed to be like what actually happened. So there may be things that were embellished in the book that you know are different in the show, and so that's a very interesting way of doing it without breaking their own canon.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that they can do that. And I feel like, I don't know why, I have a little bit of a hunch that they might do at least one big thing just to keep people on their toes.
I do think that there will be at least one major change. They've talked about
Hmm.
the canon difference, you know, enough to where it's like, okay, what did you change?
Exactly. Like, they don't just go out and say, oh, by the way, we can do this because if they didn't do something.
I mean the hook in the end of the first episode, where Viserys,
Oh, so good.
let yeah tells her about the Song of Fire and Ice. I mean that alone was such a major, just it kind of like shocked the whole timeline end to end almost.
It really did. It was so, so good. I remember watching that scene and I rewound it and I think I watched that scene 2 or 3 more times just to really get like I put the CC on. Like I was trying to really get what he was or what they had him saying there.
right. And I mean that was just it was really well shot, you know. And the whole time
I
he's
agree.
doing it, he's got the cat's paw dagger, on his hip there. So,
Absolutely.
we're all just looking at it like, what's happening now? So yeah, I mean that was a huge reveal, and I think there will be more. Um,
Oh, I 100% agree. I think that they're going to really. I have such high hopes for this one, Caleb.
I do too. I really do. So this episode, we open it up with a little bit more of the war with the crab feeder. It's been going on for, we presume, 2 years. We find out that they've gone into sort of a guerrilla warfare type situation. We see Damon out there, just destroying people with Caraxes, but it's not enough, right, to fight these guys on turf that they're familiar with.
No, absolutely. I think Damon's definitely giving it all, but he's severely probably undermanned. And he also doesn't have the advantage. They have a more advantageable position because you see that cave area and everything. They've also got the high position. You see his archers. So Damon's definitely fighting a losing battle.
He really is, and also the fact that it's kind of his ass on the line here. Like he is waging a illegal war, with only one house's resources, and then him and Caraxes.
Exactly. Like he's waging this without the Sirius's support.
And he doesn't. I mean, as we find out later in the episode, he doesn't want it either. This
Oh
is
no.
this is him doing what the line that Corliss dropped in the last episode that I thought was so good is he says something about them being the second sons of Westeros and that they had to take what they weren't going to be given anything, they had to take it, and that's
That
really
is
what this whole
such
war
a
is.
Oh, that was such a good scene. There have been some lines so far, and we are only 3 episodes in. But yeah, that was probably my favorite scene from episode 2 was that second son speech. Cause it is so good. And it's not even just like you can take it and put it in just about any fantasy you wanted to. But it was just such a good scene.
And George R. R. Martin is really known for that, wonderful prose that you'll find in his books. I mean, that's one of the things that he's really just, like he's well known for it. So,
No,
it,
absolutely. He always kind of writes characters so well that underdog character, if you would.
right. Speaking of new characters, this is the first time that I personally ever felt kind of bogged down by the introduction of characters. So we change pace here and we go to the hunt for Aegon's name day, and this is where we kind of start seeing all the sort of political machinations of the Lords of Westeros that we're so used to. Um, it doesn't help that we have Lannister twins yet again, and this time they're both males, and it's much harder to tell them apart.
Oh, absolutely. So it did like bring me some nostalgia though, because of like you said, we're very used to that politics of Westeros. We're very used to that those houses fighting for power. Uh, it was super nostalgic and yeah, twins definitely apparently run in that family.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean that's there's something in those genes where they're just they're much more likely to produce twins, and one of them is seems to always be a little sleazier than the other.
Oh yeah, for sure. That scene where he told her he was going to get a dragon pit. I was like, "Oh, sir."
Yeah, I mean, this guy had all of the like bravado and I think arrogance of Tywin, but his house doesn't yet have the means for him to
No.
fulfill it.
No, not at this time. I mean, obviously we know Lannisters will become a powerful house, but it takes quite some time. Like,
Right. Yeah, because Lord Corlys is the wealthiest man in Westeros right now, so we know the Lannisters haven't climbed that high yet.
no, no, no. We do know a little bit of Targaryen lore from Game of Thrones, so I don't feel like this is a major spoiler. But the Targaryens will hold this throne for quite some time in some form or another. Like, it will be constantly threatened, and I wouldn't call it a stronghold, but there will be, that Targaryen ruler should they stay fairly along with the story.
That's true. I mean, we all know how it's going to end up in like 170 years or so, and a lot of people as well. Like I haven't shied away from telling people, hey, look, we know that when we first were introduced to House Targaryen, it was completely in ruins, and this is the story of maybe not how we got to only there being two of them, but this is the story about how the downfall began of their
I would
house.
love for them to do multiple seasons of this and take it past Fire and Blood, take it all the way through the Mad King. Like, I would love it, Caleb, because there would be so much for them to work with because there's not a book yet.
That's true. I mean, I think if they took it all the way up through Robert's Rebellion, that would be an incredible thing. I mean, especially because now, with everything that we know, Robert Baratheon is kind of the ultimate antagonist here. Not intentionally, by any means, but he disrupted the Targaryen line.
I feel like he had good intentions. I really do in the beginning.
Right.
I feel like Robert Baratheon definitely had good intentions, and Ned Stark definitely had his reasons, as we know, for following. And it's a lot. It's a lot to unwind. That's one of the things I love about this show and things as well is, man, it's not just good guy and bad guy. It
Right.
is you, like Damon. I feel like was supposed to be like the bad guy. But I love Damon and he is my favorite character because I understand him. I understand why he makes some of the choices he makes.
Absolutely. I think he's probably my second favorite after Rhaenyra. But there's I think in the first episode, a lot of people, especially like the more casual watchers, are trying to do these 1-to-1, like, oh, Damon's going to be the new Joffrey, and Rhaenyra is going to be the new Dany, and Viserys is going to be the new Robert or the new Jamie or whatever. And it's just like the show, I think, has already turned any of those expectations on their heads, and everyone is so morally gray.
Exactly. That is what's so good about it, the writing on it. And I mean, yeah, it's based off of Martin's writing, but I give credit to these show writers and producers as well, that every character has that morally gray area where you're like, I like this character and I like this character, and they could be polar opposite characters on the other side of the fight, and you can still like both of them.
Right. I mean, I think Lord Corliss is a much more disciplined man than Damon has ever been. But he also understands like logic and strategy, and so the two of them are bonded over not only the line that he dropped about them having to take what they were going to have, but also that aspect of it too, where it's a mutually beneficial relationship, and they both understand it's a problem and it's got to be taken care of. And they both share a disdain for Viserys's, just kind of soft, politicians' answers to everything.
Absolutely, which makes that ending of episode 3 so good.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. This episode to me was kind of dragging, honestly, until that ending. I think it's the slowest of the three for sure.
So I really enjoyed some of the relationship building between Rhaenyra and Kristen Cole
Yes.
for reasons. Because I want to see where they go with this. Um, Knowing what I know from the book, whether they choose to follow or whether they choose to do something a little bit different. I'm very excited for that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I would agree entirely. It doesn't help that Kristen Cole is very easy on the eyes. So that keeps me, that helps to keep a lot of viewers, myself included, very interested in whatever he's doing. And then from the first episode, they didn't have him beat Damon in the tournament to not have him have a really important role later on.
Oh, absolutely. And I loved too in I believe it was episode 2 where Rhaenyra names him to the King's Guard. And some of the statements that she makes about wanting somebody who has seen real combat. Like they've built him up to become a major character, which he is in Fire and Blood. I just want to know where they're going to take him because they take
Right.
him a very specific place in the book.
Right. So let's talk about the hunt a little bit, actually. So we have this big ordeal, and all of the lords have, you know, come there to try to, kind of woo Viserys in their direction. All these suitors are wanting Rhaenyra's hand, and she really just doesn't want any of it at this point.
Oh no, not at all. For a multitude of reasons. I think first of all, I love that what she told her father, where she was like, I feel like, you're just kind of giving me away so that you can make room for Aegon to take the throne. And
Right.
I think that that's very much in the forefront of her mind, is she thinks she's being used as a pawn, as a chess piece, if you would. And she may be, but who's to tell what Viserys' true intention is there? But what he's telling her right now in this moment, he does flip flop a lot, is that, he plans to support her taking the throne.
I agree with that as well, and I think it's interesting that like no one believes him, right? Because they're like, well, no, he's not gonna defy tradition like that. And he's always harping on people about tradition. Um,
Exactly. And I think that's why nobody believes him, is because he is a tradition kind of guy,
right,
and him breaking tradition and leaving his heirdom to Rhaenyra, I think she just questions it. Something tells me she knows this isn't going to be an easy transition.
right. I think she's well ahead of her years as far as understanding the situation that she's in and where it's going to go. And it doesn't help that Rainey's is kind of there, kind of as a constant reminder that the men of Westeros have no desire to see a queen on the throne.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, you know, I just really enjoyed this episode and all of the politicking that was going on in it. I felt like we didn't see as much of that. I know, and not in episode 1, but even in episode 2, it was lacking just a little bit for me. I like that whole chess game politicking side of Westeros.
I agree. I really like it too. The meme that was floating around about the miniatures is probably one of the best things I've ever seen. Where it's like the Lords of Westeros, no matter where there's a battle, they always seem to have their own miniatures with them. Uh, you know, and
I
it's like
actually haven't seen that one. You'll have to send it to me.
I'll have to send it to you. It's like, do they have a nice little bag to put them in? Do they paint them themselves? You know, like they're just all a bunch of tabletop nerds.
I 100% could see Rhaenyra with a bag of miniatures. I
Yeah,
mean, the scene where she had her bard out there playing for her and she was just reading away in her book. I loved it.
yeah. I mean, I think that in this era, if either one of us was royalty, that's how we would spend our time.
1000%. You would never find me. Where's Loren? Where's the library? That's where Loren is at.
Yeah, I mean, and she had the Spotify playlist on repeat.
On
So,
repeat.
so I one of the things about the hunt that I like too, not just the politics, because I do love the Westerosi politics, but also the symbolism of it, where Viserys is, like him hunting the stag or whatever was just very symbolic of his reign, where he's afraid to really get his hands dirty, and when he does decide to, he's not good at it.
Oh my gosh, there was so much symbolism you could delve into in that hunt. So absolutely, Viserys' killing of the darker colored stag, and then you've got the white stag appearing to Rhaenyra and Kristen Cole. You've got Rhaenyra killing that massive boar, just like an ooh, that scene where she is just going in on him with that little dagger of hers. So good.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said that she actually gets the kill on the boar, herself
I
with
feel like
with
it
with
showed
Kristen's help.
so much. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
I feel like it showed so much in the difference between how Viserys did his kill and how Rhaenyra performed her kill.
I agree. At the juxtaposition of those two things, I really liked the way it was shot, and it reminded me a lot of in the first episode where the birth scene went back and forth with the tournament, and we got to see those two battlefields.
Oh my gosh, that was some incredible imagery as well. I definitely was hiding my eyes a little bit during the birth scene, but I loved that play that they did on the two battlefields, like you said, because back then the birthing room was a battlefield, and ooh, it was just so good. So good imagery.
I mean, yeah, that we definitely talked about that in the review for episode one, but it definitely deserves saying it again. That's like I think the hardest scene for me to ever watch in a television show. Probably it was incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah, it was a rough scene for sure. And I'm one that if I'm watching it by myself, I will fast forward. Outlander's a great one. I love Outlander, but especially at the end of season one, there was some episodes and I just kind of hit that fast forward button. But I was watching with my husband, so typically then I'll just kind of tuck my head.
Right. What did you think about like the white stag and kind of Rhaenyra could have gone after it. She could have ordered Kristen to bring it down, but she kind of showed it mercy, and the stag seemed to be attracted to her and not to the whole idea, that they were saying that this was some sort of prophecy, like its appearance was like a good omen for Aegon, but it seemed like Rhaenyra was kind of the target of that. What did you make of that scene?
So white stags a lot of times can symbolize power, and a lot of times back in the day it was like powerful reigns and things like that in fantasy. And so often that's what they would hunt.
Right.
And so it appearing to Rhaenyra was so just kind of foreshadowing that she does have this power to be this great ruler
I
if
agree.
she's going to be allowed to be.
And I think that she makes some of the best decisions. And she's just got, that there's that whole saying of, when a Targaryen is born, they flip a coin. And I think it's very clear that she kind of ended up on the good side of that. Damon probably on the other side.
Honestly, I think Damon's. It's hard for me to say he completely ended up on the other side because, like I said, he is my favorite character, and while he makes some poor choices. I think he has good intentions in a lot of the things that he does. Like, you have to look at it from his version. His brother is king. His brother has no male child, so who should be the next king? Damon.
Right.
So I understand, like, I get Damon.
Yeah, I mean, and he's named your niece that you are, for all intents and purposes, we are to assume he's in love with her. So,
Yeah, and that I think that they've shown enough for us to, without having any outside knowledge, assume that. Because obviously I come into this knowing outside
right.
knowledge, but I feel like when he gifted her the necklace and things like that, they're giving you glimpses that there is something between the two of them that is probably more than just your general uncle niece relationship.
Yeah, I mean, and that was incredibly normal for, Targaryens at the time anyway.
That's
And
incredibly normal for a lot of royals. I mean,
right,
you look into even like English royalty, and there's some cousin stuff.
right. Even today, I mean, not you don't even have to really go backwards for that.
No,
Even the royalty today, it's a lot more closely knit than most families would want to be.
absolutely. It's all about the purity of that blood and keeping that power where they want it.
Yeah, and it's such a wild concept that's like still something that exists in our world, but it is a thing, unfortunately.
It it very much is. So yeah, people are all like, "Oh, that's incest in the Targaryens," and I'm like, "In the Targaryens."
Right. Yeah. It's like, well, I mean, I'm not for it, but they're not the only ones doing it.
No, please come. Let me tell you the story of the fifth king of England.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, excellent point. Uh so let's see what else we got in this episode. The end of the hunt kind of happens, and I loved the imagery and the cinematography too of Rhaenyra walking back into that camp.
Oh my gosh, that was fantastic. The way that everybody just kind of turned, and she was just had every single person in that camp's attention, as she just had this powerful walk, and her head was high, and that blood was still on her. She didn't make any effort to wipe that blood off of her. She wanted every man that she walked by, Alicent, all of them, to know, hey, I killed something out there.
Right. And it was really powerful, and it's kind of setting us up kind of for the rest of, well, I don't want to say the rest of the story, but a lot of things that we know about the story as far as where her character is going. I think that this went a long way or really each episode is sort of laying out that path for us so that it's easily digestible and it really makes sense why these characters end up where they end up.
Absolutely. They are laying down all of the framework for this very strong, powerful Targaryen woman who is not just going to, you can try to take her throne from her, but she's not just going to lay down. She's not.
Right. Um, so let's then talk about that incredibly powerful ending. So after we get through the hunt, we switch over and we go back to the battle. And as we know, Viserys has said that he will send a messenger, and he's going to send a detachment of troops out to the battlefield to help in the war. He finally made a decision, and the way that Damon received this, I thought, was completely unexpected, but also in character.
Oh, I would have received it the same way. 3 years. 3 years of starving, living in the, brunt of battle, watching your men die, watching your men be hammered to things and eaten alive by crabs. 3 years. And finally, your brother's like, all right, I'll go ahead and send you a little something.
Right, and it would be the worst thing ever, I think, for Corliss or for Damon to be in that situation where it's like this ineffective king that they've been, that everyone kind of sees as really inept, had to bail them out of this war that they started.
And that's what it would have been if Damon had allowed it to happen. Would have been a bailout, and everyone would have known it. And every time he tried to command an army, they would have known he had to get bailed out by the spineless King Viserys.
Right. And so that scene at the end. Tell me about this just wonderful, I think, episode stealing scene with Damon.
Oh my gosh. So he gets this word that his brother is finally sending him a couple thousand guys to go in, and they're going to take back these steps, because all the work that he's done for 3 years, it's not important. He's going to come in and save the day. And he gets that, and he is pissed. Like, he is ready to he goes out there and he waves that white flag by himself, mind you. And he's like, oh, yeah, I'm totally, totally going to forfeit. And then he just starts mowing guys down. Like, it was just so good. It was fantastic. And then him killing the crab feeder, it was powerful, and it showed you so much of like Damon's inner strength too, as he's taking arrows and still like breaking that junk off and getting up and being like, no, this is my moment. I'm taking this shit.
Yeah, I agree. I really loved all of this. I will say that him killing the crab feeder and us not getting to see the fight and killing him off screen is the only issue I have with this, because that moment felt a little anticlimactic to me. But all of the rest of it, I was blown away by.
Absolutely. I get how that could be. As somebody who doesn't like the bloody stuff, I didn't mind that much. But I could see why it could be a little anticlimactic. And my other thing is, are they gonna that was like the baddie for the first 3 episodes. Now
Right.
I know that, like, I know kind of where the drama is gonna come from, but I wonder if they're gonna bring in another bad guy kinda.
Yeah, I thought that they might sort of expand the crab feeder maybe through most of the first season, sort of to act as that third party sort of antagonist to, sort of keep the drama moving along back in Westeros. Um, and they kind of built him up for these first 3 episodes, and then for him to die off screen, I didn't really love that choice. I would have liked to have seen him at least fight Damon, even if Damon got the best of him quickly. I do think that seeing him actually in a battle, and then even if he loses, that would have been a better choice.
Yeah, I definitely get that. That character I feel like was more so a character building scene for Damon. Okay, because he's gonna come into a really important role here, and I feel like the crab feeder situation was kind of just like a bone thrown to build up Damon's character and show you him and how he reacts to situations.
Agreed. And I think the end will sort of justify the means on that, as far as us seeing where Damon goes next. Um,
Absolutely.
I loved that we got to see Sea Smoke in this, which is Lord Corliss's. It's his eldest son. Is that right? Is his
Yeah.
dragon?
Yes. Oh, that was really good. And I remember watching it, and I actually told my husband to pause it, and I did a quick Google because I thought it was. But yeah, it is Lord Corliss's oldest son's dragon.
Yeah, I really loved that. I loved the seeing the two of them over the battlefield. Um, it was just that, once again, the production value on this show is top notch. I think it's even better than than Game of Thrones was. As someone who's really into like video from a technical standpoint, I mean, up until recently, Game of Thrones was not presented in 4K. It wasn't. It didn't have HDR. So this series has always been produced with those things in mind, and I think that that has brought it up to like a modern production standard. Because as we talked about earlier, the Rings of Power, the
Hmm.
quality of content on streaming, the visuals and everything else, the production values are sky high right now.
Absolutely, and they had to because Rings of Power. Like
Right.
that is probably considered an immediate competition right now. Even though they play on different nights, they are two high fantasy shows from two different production companies that are showing right now. And, of course, there's going to be people like you and I who just love all of it, and we're going to watch all of it and just devour it. But I'm sure there are people out there that are House of Dragons fans, and there are people out of there that are going to be Ring of Power fans. And they're going to be like, oh no, this is better than this because of this reason. So they almost had to up their visuality because they knew what they were going to be literally premiering within about a week or two
Right. House of the Dragon got the jump on them. The premiere
of.
for
Hmm.
House of the Dragon did about 10 million. And then Amazon says the first two episodes were viewed by like 25 million households or something like that. I don't know how they're measuring that. I don't know if that's like, okay, like 13 million people watched both episodes or something, I don't know if they're counting it double if you saw them both. We're not really sure yet
Right.
because it's very fresh. I mean, it just came out. It's less than a week old. Um, but I think that they are, all high fantasy draws from Tolkien somewhere. And in George R. R. Martin's case, George R. R. Martin is sort of the antithesis of Tolkien, right? Like, he doesn't. Tolkien is very much these are the good. This is the good side, and that's the bad side. And with George R. R. Martin, it's very much everyone is kind of morally gray. Most people are selfish and looking out for themselves and their own interests. So I think they can easily coexist because they're very different, like pacing wise, tonally, everything.
Oh, absolutely. And I love that you made that statement that so much of modern high fantasy does stem from Tolkien because, like, that's my bread and butter. That's the first high fantasy that I ever read. I, got grounded one summer when I was like 15 or 16 and couldn't have a phone or like a DVD player or whatever. And I read Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. That's what I did for that summer because I had nothing else to do.
Right.
And I love when nowadays authors give credit to him because this is such an unheard thing. Like elves writing languages. And when I go to England next year, I am definitely doing a Tolkien spot crawl.
I am already jealous. The envy is already bubbling up. I have to. It wouldn't be an episode of a podcast I'm on without me making a Sanderson reference. But he actually recently talked about Tolkien in regards to Rings of Power and how, with most other genres like horror, you can say that science fiction. You can take that back to Mary Shelley. Um,
Absolutely.
but with most genres, there's not like a one person where you can say they are the like the origin, at least the modern origin of this genre. But with high fantasy, there's no denying that every single author who writes high fantasy is influenced by Tolkien, whether they wanted to do something along the same lines as him, or whether they wrote like George R. R. Martin, where they wanted to avoid, um, because pretty much everything he does is like I said earlier, it's the antithesis of Tolkien, right? It's if Tolkien did, Tolkien wasn't big on sex or violence. George R. R. Martin, that's his bread and butter. He always, everything in Lord of the Rings eventually has a happy ending, and it's light versus dark, and we get basically none of that in George R. R. Martin's work.
No, he's got so much more, like we talked about earlier. Everything's morally gray. Everything's like, well, I could see why he did that, but he probably shouldn't have.
Right. And there's just nobody writing high fantasy that can say that they weren't, majorly influenced either for or against Tolkien's works. So that's just, I mean,
Absolutely.
that world, the building in that world has to be nerve-wracking, because I'm sure that the showrunners are big fans of the genre. They have to be.
Absolutely. And shout out to you too, because this isn't the first time I've heard you name drop Mary Shelley. I heard another podcast where you did, and that her Frankenstein is literally like probably my first love. And a lot of people don't give her the credit, man. They just don't for science fiction. So every time that you give her that credit, I'm just like, fuck yes.
I mean, here's the thing: she's the mother of that genre, in my opinion, and I think, in fact, and that's I think that same like toxic group that doesn't is opposed to brown dwarves is like, there's no way science fiction was created by a woman. Um,
No.
so
And
it's that same group, and the more they do it, the more that makes me want to just let everyone know that that is in fact what happened.
exactly. All that does is make me want to go purchase another copy. You know what I mean? Like, I need a new cover for this one.
I'm sure they have like a super expensive Frankenstein leather bound that I'll Google when we get off of here, and it can live on my bookshelf with my other leather bounds. I'll allow it.
Absolutely. I love Bookish Box, I think it's called. They do some gorgeous covers of classics as well as your new stuff. Like they have a really nice Akatar set that I've had my eyeballs on. So you and I are similar in that we love those different cover arts.
Yeah, I am obsessed. You've seen my bookshelf where I have almost, eventually it's going to be all of the Cosmere leather bounds, and then eventually when they do Skyward Special Edition stuff, pretty much anything Brandon puts out, I'm going to get I have my hardback edition that I will loan out to people, and then I have the leather bound that doesn't leave the bookshelf unless I take it off of there like Gandalf reading an old tome, and show it to someone.
No, absolutely. And then you got your purists who are like, "Oh, if it's not the original cover, it's not right." It's the brown dwarf people. It's the
Right.
Mary Shelley's not the mother of sci-fi people. And I love it though. You and I have, like I said, talked about it, and I have a gorgeous copy of the works of Jane Austen that is leather bound that will never leave my possession.
That sounds fantastic. I will have to. You'll have to show me that at some point, because I definitely want to take a look at that. I love specific covers and things like that. Especially leather bounds. They're just so nice.
They are.
So uh, and I like I wouldn't consider myself like a huge Jane Austen fan, but I am a fan of some of her works. Like, I mean, Pride and Prejudice is one of the all time greats. And it doesn't need me to say that.
No. I love the way she writes women.
Right.
Um I like at this time the way she was writing women even is more impressive when you think about when these works were coming out.
Right. Yeah,
Just
I agree.
the power she was giving to these young women and the hope that she was giving to young women who could get their hands on her writing, who were dealing with situations like arranged marriages. And it's just, especially when you get into the history of Jane Austen's work, it's incredibly powerful.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, I actually need to read more of her stuff, so I think next year I'm gonna force myself to put more classics on my TBR because
Mhm.
um, there's going to be a huge drought before the new Stormlight book comes out, unfortunately, and I'm going to be very sad if I don't keep my reading list up to date and occupied with things. Um,
Name of the Wind. It needs to be on your list, sir.
I know I can always come to you with something to fill that bookshelf with, so
Yeah.
I will be
You
doing
told
that.
me you were going to read it. Name of the Wind.
I did, and I'm committed to it. It'll be the next like non-Sanderson thing that I read for sure.
Fantastic.
That being said, is there anything else from this episode of House of the Dragon you wanted to talk about before we score it and wrap things up?
Not really. I One scene that we kind of didn't really touch on that I loved was the scene at the, I guess it was probably like the table between Rhaenyra and Viserys towards the end of the episode, right before they cut to the Daemon situation, where she kind of confronted him
Right.
and he was like, I'm going to let you choose your husband. I'm going to support you. And she was like, I feel like you're not. I feel like you're just trying to trade me away in order to make room on the throne for Aegon. And I really loved where they left that because I feel like they're leaning towards some health issues with him. We already in episode 1 saw he had some issues going on with his back, and you and I have talked a little bit about our crazy theories on what that actually is. But I'm glad that they gave them that moment because I don't know how much longer Viserys is going to have, and they're kind of leading that. So I'm glad that they had that moment at that table.
Agreed. And this show is doing its best to avoid all of the terrible prequel tropes. Like, there's a lot of bad writers out there that would have been like, oh, we could have him die the same way on the hunt, and
Mm-mm.
I'm just like, oh, please don't do it. And every time I worry about that, this show avoids it. Um, I did also love the scene where Otto comes to talk to him as well, and Viserys is just kind of like, dude, I'm trying to get drunk. This is my kid's birthday. Like we're on a hunt, and Otto's trying to, he's trying to, manipulate him and play politics with him, and it takes him a minute to see that Viserys is kind of fed up with it, and then Jason Lannister kind of ends up getting the backlash from that when he presents him with the spear.
No, I really liked what they're doing with Otto's character. We have a mutual friend, and he and I were discussing Otto's character recently, and he was like, I liked him in episode 1. I thought he was going to be a really strong, good character with, being the hand of the king. And then, he's starting to be real manipulative. And I love how they're showing that side. And they do kind of show his little side conversations with Alicent. Because I don't think Alicent started out in this situation with bad intentions. You showed her friendship with Rhaenyra in the beginning,
Right.
but I feel like her father on her little shoulder, you're seeing that. You're seeing the whispers. Your son should be king.
Right. He's definitely playing the game. He is he's the little finger of this story. I said earlier I hate those one-to-one comparisons, but I think he's a lot craftier than Littlefinger was because Littlefinger was kind of shisty, the whole time. You just kind of got that used car salesman kind of feel from him.
No, absolutely. He is definitely trying to move pieces. He is, playing the chess game actively. There might be some people sitting on the sidelines, debating whether or not they want to get into this game, maybe like the Corlises and stuff. Should I join this chess game? But we're really seeing that he is actively moving his pawns.
Agreed. Yeah, and we'll see how that plays out. I actually worry about Otto's longevity because I feel like at some point, one of the things about Game of Thrones is until Danny shows up late in the game. Uh, if you were, there wasn't the risk of someone getting tired of you and having their dragon melt you. And he does run that risk, and I already thought it might happen to him in episode 2. So, he's got to play
Absolutely.
smart.
Absolutely. You got to play smart in this game because you will get your face melted off. And I feel like if King Viserys does pass here soon, he's on his way out the door.
Right? Yeah, I agree. Well, if you had to score this one out of 10, where does it rank for you? Or if you want me
Let's
to go first,
see.
I will.
You go ahead and go because I'm going to think on it. And are we just doing episode 3? Are we doing like House of Dragons thus far?
You can do both. You're the guest here, so
Okay.
you can do whatever you want. So for me, so I gave the first episode a 9, and I think I gave the second one an 8. And I'm gonna keep that going and give this one an 8 as well. I had a few issues with it, but overall, I still think it's fantastic. And I would say the show for me is probably around an 8.5, with the premiere still being the strongest part of it.
So I would probably give individually. Episode 1 is like a 9.5 for me. It missed very little. It had the teeth that I needed to get me back into this, to make me say, okay, they're going to do a good job of this. The other
Right.
2 episodes, I would probably give them an 8. I think that both episode 2 and 3 are solid 8s, but that would leave me at a 9 overall because I'm liking the show as a whole cylinder there.
I agree.
So yeah, definitely a 9 overall.
Yeah, that's definitely like kind of where I'm at with it too. And if they follow the Game of Thrones formula, where like the ninth episode is like the huge sort of it basically is like the season finale, but where that episode 9 with Game of Thrones always was just on another level from everything else, then they could work themselves into a 10 situation if they're not careful.
Oh, for sure. Like, do we know how many episodes they've got this first season?
I'm pretty sure it's going to be 10, whereas Rings of Power is going to be 8, so they're going to end around the same time.
Yeah, they are. That's going to be a big one. I feel like that season finale weekend. Now, Rings of Power is going to have the jump on them because you got to remember that show comes on Fridays.
Right.
And then Sundays is House of Dragons. So if they do that, where it is 8 and 10 and they end on the same weekend, that's going to be a hell of a weekend of watching, first of all. And second of all, ooh,
We're going to be so sad the next week.
I know, I
Um,
know.
but on
That's,
a
we
good
were,
note, we do have so a lot of our listeners are really into She-Hulk 2. And that's going to actually end around that same time, but we do have a new Star Wars series. The Andor series is coming up, and that'll be airing. So
which I am hype for, because let me tell you, I am a Diego Luna girl, right? That's the one, right?
okay, I did not know that. That's interesting. So you're all in on this show then.
Absolutely. I fell in love with Diego Luna back in like 2002 when he did Havana Nights, okay?
I see.
So I I'm all in with Diego Luna. Now, my favorite character ever in Star Wars is Anakin. I love his crest. I love his highs and lows of it. I love all of it. But I'm excited to see Diego Luna.
Yeah, I did not love him in Rogue One. Not him, but just the character. So I'm interested to see where they take this. I feel like it's an unexplored time frame in the Star Wars universe, and the production value looks like it's off the charts. So I'm definitely gonna give it a shot. And in the event that I don't like it, Mandalorian is just around the corner. So
And Mando has been solid, like
every
two
episode.
seasons exactly. I have just absolutely loved it. We would have to do a whole episode just on the Star Wars universe because I got so much that I can talk about on it. But yeah, I'm excited because it is kind of a not talked about time.
Right.
So we ran into with issues with Obi-Wan
Right.
where there was too many people saying this couldn't be, this couldn't be, this isn't canon, this isn't this or that, which they did have a very fine line to walk. Um and so because of that, I feel like this Diego Luna show could be really good because they don't have all those fine lines that they have to walk in between.
With Star Wars, not to get off on a Star Wars tangent because we'll be here forever, but with Star Wars in particular, I am going to start looking at who is writing the thing before I get hyped about it, because if I would have known that Obi-Wan was going to be like sequel trilogy Star Wars creators making an Obi-Wan show, my expectations would have been incredibly low for it. But with this show, with
Mm-hmm.
Andor, this is pretty much the same creators and producers and stuff that actually did Rogue One. So I think the tone is going to be very similar, as well as like the writing and whatnot.
Well, I'm definitely hyped for it, and I may be hyping myself up too much just because I like the casting as much as I do. But yeah, I'm excited for it.
Well, on that note, like you said, we would have to sit here for an entire episode and just nerd out about Star Wars, maybe
We
multiple
could.
episodes. We could.
We definitely could because you haven't even touched the cusp of my absolute devotion to Star Wars. I constantly am asking my husband to do a rewatch or to do a binge with me, and he's like, "No, I don't want to watch it again."
I am always down as long as we're not going to watch the sequel trilogy.
See,
Never down for that.
yeah, I can take each one and appreciate it for what it is. There are different things that I like about each version or each trilogy that I can just sit back and almost at some points turn my mind off and just appreciate it.
Right. And that I can see that. I mean, obviously, like I'm a big fan of the prequels, but I have to ignore some of that dialogue that's really cringy. um, but I digress. Anyway, this has been super fun. I'm really glad you decided to join me for this episode. Everybody listening to this, go and check out Coffee and Lore on YouTube. Like I said, link in the description. And once again, absolutely thanks for joining me today.
Oh, no problem. It was an absolute blast. Thank you for having me. Anytime that you want to talk anything sci fi related, whether it's film, books, I'm your girl. Just let me know.
It sounds good to me. And as always, thanks for listening, everyone. This has been an Evolved Review.